I think she's going to win. I've said that. I just said that a moment ago. And I think it's immediately going to be appealed, because I think the government that spent $10 million and gone this far in, they're not going to let her go easily. I think that's why Perkins McVeigh is taking so long to write this ruling too. I think she wants it to be bulletproof. She wants it to be appeal-proof as far as possible.
Look, I don't know what the Crown would do after the judgment. I can say that acquittals arising from mischief charges from the Freedom Convoy have been appealed by the Crown.
Hey, welcome back. It's been more than 3 years since the trucker convoy electrified the country. Really, I think it was the largest peaceful civil rights movement in Canadian history. And the convoy in Ottawa wasn't just a watershed in Canadian politics and law. It was an international event. I think the entire world was riveted by what those grassroots truckers and their allies were doing. It was so authentic, so spontaneous, and you could tell when there was a GoFundMe crowdfund set up for them, the government squashed that. So what? They weren't based on money. No party backed them. No official instrument of the establishment backed them. That's why they couldn't be stopped, and it was amazing to see. It was a peaceful process, and never let anyone tell you it was an illegal meeting. No judicial organization, no court, no tribunal ever ruled that it was illegal. That was just a phrase used by its enemies. In fact, the only thing that's been ruled illegal was the Emergencies Act martial law that was brought in. As you may know, the Federal Court of Canada ruled that to be illegal and unconstitutional. And now there's lawsuits against the government for what they did with that false emergency. But there was one woman who stood out from the whole thing. You know who I'm talking about, Tamara Lich. She's not a trucker herself. She came from the logistics business. She's just a mom and a grandma from out west. And this was her moment. This was her time to shine. And she got involved with the truckers, and soon she became sort of their unofficial spokesperson, their poet in a way, who would make Facebook posts and encourage people to stay positive. She became a symbol. She was everything that the establishment was not. She was modest. She was humble. She was positive compared to the government's brutality. So they had to target her. They had to stop her. They had to rebrand the truckers as something awful and evil. She, Tamara Lich, by being the personification of the truckers, made it a positive, fun, family-friendly thing. Just like the images of the bouncy castles and the hot tubs. It was not the January 6th narrative that Justin Trudeau so desperately wanted. Remember, calling people a fringe minority with unacceptable views.
We know the way through this pandemic is by getting everyone vaccinated. And the overwhelming majority, close to 90% of Canadians, have done exactly that. The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other, who know that following the science and stepping up to protect each other is the best way to continue to ensure our freedoms, our rights, our values as a country.
Well, Tamara Lich indeed was arrested just over 3 years ago and charged with inciting mischief. And here we are more than 3 years later, and we have not yet had the verdict. It turned into the longest mischief trial in Canadian history. In fact, as far as anyone can tell, the longest mischief trial anywhere in the Commonwealth countries, UK, Australia, wherever. Clearly, the process is the punishment. As you know, I attended court several times, and Rebel News and the Democracy Fund attended court every time. It was clear that the process, the prosecution, was designed as an enormous, extraordinary punishment, an absurd, months-long process. But it's all coming to a close this week. On Thursday morning, Tamara Lich will be read her judgment by the judge in the courthouse in Ottawa, and we will be there. By we, I mean me, with Rebel News, and Mark Joseph and the team at the Democracy Fund. And Mark joins us now. Mark, great to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
Did I properly get the details of Tamara Lich?
Yep, that was pretty comprehensive and professional, Ezra. Couldn't have put it better.
Now, Tamara Lich, no normal human being could afford to spend, and I'm not going to say the amount that we spend, but you could figure it out. We've got Lawrence Greenspan, one of the top criminal lawyers in the country, plus his 2 associates. That's 3 lawyers who have been working on this case for an enormous amount of time. I don't think I'm going to reveal their fee, but you can imagine how large it is. No normal human being could pay that. And if you were a millionaire, you wouldn't pay that. You'd say, I'm not spending my life savings. I didn't work 30 years to save a nest egg to have it spent on lawyers. I'm just going to plead guilty. So it took a very special person to fight, but it also took the Democracy Fund, of which you're a lawyer, to crowdfund from our viewers to pay for it. It was only that combination that could have fought it. A rich person wouldn't have paid. A poor person couldn't have paid. Only the crowdfunding model in the Democracy Fund would work.
That's right. I mean, TDF got involved because the civil liberties issues are engaged quite substantially on this trial. So, we turned to Lawrence Greenspan and his team. They're obviously one of the best in the country, but they could take other cases. So we had to convince him that this was a good fit. He agreed. And TDF then stepped up, and our donors came through for us. And fortunately, Tamara got an excellent defense.
Yeah, I attended, I'm going to guess, 5 days of court over the whole thing. But you or your colleague, Adam Blake Gallipo or Alan Honner, we had the whole TDF team there. We were in the court every single day, live tweeting it, observing it, talking to Lawrence and the team. This was the Democracy Fund's time to shine.
Right. I mean, I think we provided some intelligent discussion on our feed. People seem to respond to that. A lot of these terms are complex. So there's a Carter application we had to explain to our readers and viewers. She was charged with 5 offenses. We had to disambiguate those. So I think we did a fairly good job. But again, the Crown spent 45 days slogging through this stuff, trying to make the case, and we had to explain that to our viewers.
I sat there, and the day I really realized what was going on, there was some mid-level bureaucrat from the city of Ottawa who talked about how he would go for walks in the downtown Ottawa and just what he would see. Now, he didn't record anything. He didn't take a journal. He was basically just giving his therapeutic views of, and I felt this way, and I felt that way, and he would meander. And he, within half an hour, it was clear that this guy had never spoken to Tamara Lich, had never interacted with her, had never seen her, did not know her other than through the media. He had no standing as a witness. He had no standing as an expert. He was just some guy who the prosecution made the court listen to for nearly an entire day, his feelings. And I was just thinking, what the devil is going on here? And why is this being permitted? And when I asked some folks, they said, this is how it's going to be for weeks. But the judge, and here's the theory I heard, if the judge wouldn't allow it, if the judge would clamp down on it, the prosecution might find that as some sort of a grounds for appeal. So the judge was very lenient to let the prosecution take liberties so that an appeal, which is almost a certainty if Tamara Lich wins, that an appeal is not likely because the prosecution was given every indulgence at the trial level, and a court of appeal will see that and say, no, you guys were given every opportunity. And that's the theory I heard for why this trial turned into a monster. Now, I don't like that. I think the government should have been chided. Listening to this bureaucrat, dear diary, when I walked down the street, I felt scared, like it was that kind of BS.
Right. Okay. So there's 2 things. I've heard that theory. I don't disagree. Lawyers always try to read the tea leaves to figure out what the judge is thinking. But Justice Perkins McVeigh is a very experienced judge. She wants to give wide latitude to the defense and the Crown to present their case. I think she did so, even though the defense didn't enter a case. They just disputed the sufficiency of the Crown's case. And the other thing I would say is that the judge wants hard evidence. So feelings, what did you think about the convoy? What did you believe about the convoy? Those sorts of amorphous type statements aren't going to play for her. She wants hard evidence here. Was the road blocked by the defendants? Did the defendants intimidate anyone through their words? Did they counsel anyone through their words? And what words were they? We heard a lot of things about hold the line was the big phrase.
Yeah.
And the defense pointed out, well, the police were using the phrase hold the line. So it's ambiguous. And if it's ambiguous, it doesn't have a certain meaning. And therefore, it's not proven beyond a reasonable doubt that that phrase meant a certain thing.
And so what's your response then if you do get arrested, if you're the next person that police do arrest?
I'd love it if you'd speak louder.
She wants to know what my response would be if I get arrested.
What's the response? Hold the line!
Hold the line.
I think you understand where I'm going.
And even hold the line, like I say, this was not a riot. This was not an illegal gathering. It had never been condemned as such. The Emergencies Act does not stop peaceful protests. It's actually clear about that. You know, you make me remember, I was in court on one of the last days of the trial, and I think it was the defense that played, and you correct me if my memory is wrong, I'm just going from memory here, played 5 very short clips of Tamara Lich. There were 5 very short video, I'm going to call them like a cameo appearance. It was almost like the video was over there, but Tamara Lich was in the background. Or she just passed through and said, hi. They were absurd and ridiculous. And I'm thinking, why are these being shown? They don't show anything. They certainly don't show any crime. It's almost like they were, you know, you leave your phone camera on by accident and you get like a goofy, and I thought, what is this? And I was told by the lawyer, that is the sum total of all the actual, like you say, hard evidence. No one saw Tamara Lich do anything. No one heard her do anything. No one was received or sent any email. Those 5 little, you know, she's standing in the background was the totality of any video of her doing anything in Ottawa. She was just a regular person who happened to be a symbol. And it hit me because I was thinking, why are they showing these meaningless shards or like, there were some of them were like 10 seconds long to make the point that there is nothing here. So when you say Tamara Lich brought no case, she didn't. It's on the government's. It's their onus to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. In Canada, a defendant doesn't have to prove they're not guilty. The government has to prove they are. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I am so confident she's going to win.
Look, I don't want to oversell it. The Crown put in a lot of evidence. As you say, some of that was a little mystifying to us, but the judge has to judge the totality of the evidence, and there was a lot in there. The question is, was the evidence that was presented, does it fit within each element of the offense? Because every element of the offense must be proven. So that's an open question. There's some jeopardy here for both the defendants. You know, so we'll see what Justice Perkins-Withey does.
You know, I sat in this judge's court a couple of years ago when Vice Admiral Mark Norman was being prosecuted in an extremely political sham prosecution by the Trudeau government. They accused him of some treachery or something because he commented on shipbuilding policy. And I was there in court in the day when the prosecution admitted they didn't give all the documents to Vice Admiral Norman that he could use to defend himself. And they had held back, the Trudeau prosecutors had illegally held back information. And they finally revealed it. And the case was dropped immediately. And it was quite a scandal that he had been put through this process to that date. And I understand he got his legal bills compensated by the government. He was vindicated, and Trudeau became even a greater disgrace. My point for saying this is that Justice Perkins-Withey was the same judge in that case. And the reason I find that interesting and noteworthy is because she, with her own eyes, at least on that other occasion, has seen how devious and political and unethical political prosecutions in Ottawa can be. And just like Vice Admiral Mark Norman was an enemy of the state Tamara Lich is an enemy of the state. And that also gives me a little bit of hope that this judge knows BS when she smells it.
Well, look, I can't speculate as to the reasons for this prosecution. We do know, as you say, it was a lengthy trial, 45 days. A lot of judicial resources were spent here. I'll let your viewers speculate as to why that was. Certainly, Tamara was a dissenter, but this case is going to have ramifications for protests, peaceful protests, and free speech around the country, and that goes to labor disputes, that goes to ethnic and religious protesting that we've seen in the last few months, that goes to G7 protests, and I think Justice Perkins McVeigh will decide based on the precedents established in those cases. So, and she's no fool. She's going to look at the case law and she's going to look at the evidence and arrive at, I think, at a just decision.
I just don't want to reveal the fees of Lawrence Greenspan. I think he's worth every penny, by the way, but it's extremely expensive to have 3 top criminal lawyers defend, and that's just Tamara Lich's lawyers. Chris Barber has a team of lawyers too. I think there's 5 or 6 lawyers in that courtroom every day. So I have sort of a rough idea of how much money the defense costs, and it's not unadjacent to $1 million. Let me just say that. But for every defense lawyer, there's a prosecutor. And by the way, there's the judge and the clerks and the courthouse and the court security. And then there was the police in the first place. And then there's the witnesses who 45 days or whatever with. I don't think there's any way that the prosecution of Tamara Lich cost taxpayers less than $10 million. I just don't see. I know what a sliver of this budget is, what Tamara Lich's lawyer charges, but then you got to multiply that out, and you got to realize all the hands here. And then there's the whole, it's like that TV show Law and Order. There's the first drama on the streets with the cops, and then there's the second drama in the courts. I think it's a $10 million sham trial just to get Tamara.
Well, it's certainly a lot of judicial resources. The TDF represented maybe 30, assisted maybe 40 people charged criminally for offenses arising out of the Freedom Convoy. And the Crown was looking for jail time in all of those cases. Now, we managed to get positive resolutions, I think conditional discharges for all of them, but they certainly spent a lot of time going after what we see as fairly low-level offenses. And I think that's problematic when it comes to the administration of justice, because we see a lot of crime nowadays, serious crime on the streets affecting regular people. And the Crown has to make a decision as to what they're going to pursue, what things they're going to take to trial. And they have time limits, so they have to move quickly. So yes.
That's a great point. You say the trial was 45 days approximately?
45 or 47.
45, 47, let's say almost 50 days. 50 full days, I think. Mm-hmm. So a trial of a minor criminal matter might happen in half a day. Might take a day, might take 2 days. Let's just say it takes a full day to prosecute a break and enter. So I guess the prosecutors would be taking orders from the government of Ontario, but the feds were pretty heavily involved in this too. So Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau made the decision that not only should $10 million go to hounding Tamara Lich, but 50 other cases should be abandoned, avoided. 50 other cases should be cleared aside. Real crimes, property crimes, crimes of violence, just for the political crime. We've got to take 50 days. We've got to take $10 million to go after Tamara Lich. I think she's going to win. I've said that. I just said that a moment ago. And I think it's immediately going to be appealed. Because I think the government that spent $10 million and gone this far in, they're not going to let her go easily. I think that's why Perkins McVeigh is taking so long to write this ruling too. I think she wants it to be bulletproof. She wants it to be appeal-proof as far as possible.
Look, I don't know what the Crown would do after the judgment. I can say that acquittals arising from mischief charges from the Freedom Convoy have been appealed by the Crown. And we know that the penalty in the Pat King trial is under appeal. I believe it's going to be appealed by the Crown. So the Crown certainly takes a hard look at these things, and they do have a motivation apparently to appeal. So we'll see.
I saw the Coots 3 trial, and 2 of the men got discharged just they're free to go. One of them, who didn't show any remorse, spent some time in jail. Tamara Lich didn't say anything. She didn't, I don't think she said a word in the entire trial. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Listen, thanks to you and the TDF crew for helping. Thanks to our lawyer, Alan Greenspan, and his team. We haven't got the final bill yet, and I'm sort of bracing for that. But if folks want to help, you can go to helptamara.com. If we, and by we, I'm not an officer or a director of the Democracy Fund, but we're the chief fundraisers for it through our Rebel News viewers. If Tamara Lich did not have this lawyer, she would have been steamrolled. She would have been ground into powder. She would have been treated like the J6, like the January 6th prisoners in the United States were. She would have been in jail for an enormous period of time. She's already in jail for too much. And I think that this is a case where crowdfunding a lawyer made a real difference. So thanks to you and the team.
You're welcome.
All right, folks, there you have it. You're gonna be there for the ruling on Thursday?
I will be there live tweeting. That's correct.
It's Thursday, right?
It's Thursday.
All right, I'll be there for sure. I'll be there too. I'll be there live tweeting, and I'll give you a report the moment we know. In the meantime, if you want to help us with the legal fees, go to helptamara.com. The money goes straight to the Democracy Fund. It does not go to Rebel News. And by the way, you also get a charitable tax receipt, which is helpful too. All right, stay with us. More ahead. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.